Hi, my name is Trevor Grant. I'm an Explosive Ordinance Disposal Technician for the United States Air Force, and I'm going to tell you about my job. Um, Most of what we do is responding to either OCONUS or stateside IEDs. That's what our biggest threat has been recently. A lot of what we do, and the reason why the Air Force has Explosive Ordnance Disposal is whenever jets take off and land, if they have a piece of ordnance that they go to drop that never comes off the wing, or a flare that doesn't eject all the way, we're the ones that have to go out, pull it down, make sure nothing went wrong so the jet can take back off and continue its mission. We're also there for flight line recovery. So if a flight line gets bombed, we're out there. We go take care of anything that didn't explode, and then the civil engineers follow behind us and recover the flight line.
When you say stateside IEDs, what kind of threat is that right now?
Currently, I've seen zero stateside IEDs, so the threat's pretty small. And for the most part, whenever a stateside IED comes up, it's the FBI's jurisdiction. It's not necessarily ours, but we can be called out to do some of the FBI's like kind of monkey work. But if there's a tool that the local bomb squad needs or something like that, like we can bring it out to them if they don't have it. But for the most part, we don't always respond to them. If we're requested, we will, but it's few and far between.
So you do get requests from other jurisdictions, though, for assistance?
Yes. Recently, so like the biggest requests that we get are for like military munitions. So we have something called the MMR, or the military munitions rule. So basically, any U.S. military munitions we're responsible for from cradle to grave. So if something gets dropped and it doesn't explode, we're responsible for getting rid of it. It's kind of like the same thing as like if a company is producing hazardous waste, they're responsible for getting rid of said hazardous waste. It's the same idea.
So you could get a call now for old munitions from 30 years ago or anything like that, and you'd be responsible for dealing with it?
Yeah, there's been a few calls like over in the Virginia area and stuff like that for like cannonballs from the Civil War.
Is that branch specific, or is it just whoever's closest?
It's it's kind of both. There's a lot of politics involved with who responds. It's supposed to be the Army. The way the branches are divided up is the Navy is responsible for all underwater ordnance. The Army is responsible for all major land masses. The Marines are responsible for major land masses alongside the Army, as well as inerting ordnance. And then the Air Force, like our specialty, is just kind of aircraft.
What does it look like when you're dealing with ordnance disposal? I guess go through some of the examples we talked about so far in terms of maybe land or stateside IED, something stuck in a plane, and kind of go through them like that, how you would handle it.
So, I mean, without getting too into detail of like our exact procedures, a lot of it's kind of like dependent. So, a stateside IED, it's really slow, really methodical. It's a lot of work with the robot, a lot of work with X-rays. So, I mean, you're using like stateside IED, you have all the time in the world. You can shut shit down and like actually work. Ideally, you don't shut everything down because, you know, if you shut down a major highway, people are going to start wondering why it's shut down still. But for the most part, you have all the time and tools at your disposal, and you can just work. It's really slow and methodical. Whereas like an overseas IED, you're kind of on a time crunch. Your goal is to basically not get shot at while you're working at it. So you're trying to figure stuff out as safely as possible, especially in a OCONUS environment. It has to happen a lot quicker. And then like aircraft, so like UXO is a lot more, you're a lot freer to walk down on a UXO than you are an IED. UXOs are a lot more predictable, I'd say. IEDs, you're problem solving as you're looking at it, whereas a UXO, you kind of have a general idea of kind of what's in the area, what's been dropped. And if you don't, like UXOs, as long as you don't, for the most part, as long as you don't touch them or kick them, they're not going to just randomly explode.
That's unexploded ordnance,
Yeah,
UXO?
yeah, UXO is unexploded ordnance. But for the most part, like aircraft is pretty easy. For the almost every time when you're walking up to an aircraft, I wouldn't say you know what's on it, because half the time when you request what was loaded out on the plane, they'll give you the wrong information, which is annoying, but that's just what happens. So you'll walk up to it and you can figure it out pretty quick. Usually it says it right on the side of what you're dealing with. So I mean, U.S. ordnance, especially when it's not super old or it hasn't been, it hasn't hit the ground, is pretty well labeled and pretty well marked. So you can figure stuff out pretty quick on an aircraft op. Those are pretty safe, pretty easy to deal with. It's basically just figuring out what you have, downloading it, getting rid of it, or turning it in. And then UXOs are as easy as figuring out what it is. So using our publications, measurements that you've taken off the ordnance, and using kind of what we refer to as like an EOD Google, and looking it up and trying to find it that way.
Is anything ever reused, or is it always disposed of?
I've never seen anything reused per se. I've seen things like turned back in, and I don't know exactly what the munition side of the world does with turned back in ordnance, but there are definitely times where they can reuse things, but I don't know if their like procedures allow them to.
Mm.
So I don't know per se if they can.
Now, you've talked a lot about blowing stuff up. When do you blow stuff up?
Um, there's a lot of times. So our biggest thing is so the biggest time that we blow things up is when things get like basically their munitions expire, which is weird to say. They don't necessarily actually expire, but the military deems them that they've been on the shelf for too long and they need to get rid of them. So they give them to us. We blow them up. Those are some of my favorite ones to do, because you're getting like, it's like while I was deployed, we got a few 2,000-pound bombs just because they were like, oh, these have been in the MSA for too long. We have to get rid of them. So there's that. And then there's the other times we blow things up is if we can't work on an IED, or if it's in an improvised explosive device, if it's in an unsafe area that's not worth risking your life for. So if something's off, not in a major road, just kind of off to the side in the middle of nowhere, that's not, our troops aren't passing by, civilians aren't passing by, there's no reason really to go over there. Typically you just blow it up. Because it's not worth risking your life to try and gather some evidence. Ideally, we try not to blow things up immediately, because we try to gather some evidence. But the other time we blow things up is during range clearance. And range clearance is like, we'll go out and you're just sweeping the area, making sure there's nothing that hasn't exploded. And if there is something that hasn't exploded, you mark it on a grid. You'll come back another day, and all the things that you've marked on a grid, you'll lay C4 on and blow.
Now, in a controlled det like that, what does it look like?
What do you mean?
Basically, if, let's just say, standard range clearance, you're going out, how much C4 are you laying, and do you just get to, basically sit back and enjoy the fireworks, or is it like high stress the entire time? How does that end up looking for you guys?
I'd say range clearances are never high stress. I love them. For the most part, you're riding around on an ATV, and it's, you're just rolling around marking things, and you go out with C later. But the amount of C really kind of depends on it really kind of depends on the munition and how much C4 you have. Obviously, you don't want to waste C4, but there are times where, like the other day,
with you. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I was gonna say, like the other day, we used 4 cases of C4 for some stuff we got from NASA, but we can't really determine that we actually needed 4 cases of C4. We were just like, better safe than sorry kind of thing.
I get that. Okay, so there are some calculations that would go into your EOD Google, for example, to be able to determine what the minimum safe amount would be, for example.
For sure. And most EOD techs kind of have a general idea, like when to use like a half block of C4 or a full block or a case, but our publications in our like mobile field kit, which is the EOD Google, inside of it, in different pubs you can find like the demo procedures for different ordnance items. So you'll figure out how much C4 you need, or you know.
What's the difference between being like home doing your job versus being on deployment? How different is it?
So my deployment was pretty laid back. I didn't deploy anywhere. Like I didn't deploy to a combat zone, but combat zones, from the stories that I've heard, are very different. But the deployment that I had, it's only slightly different. Some of the rules change. Like home, I deal a lot with the EPA. I don't deal with the EPA as much. Like when I was deployed, we didn't really deal with them at all. Um, and then like the dynamics of dealing with, like, so here we deal a lot with the state EPA. There we were dealing with like the host nation country. So just kind of the dynamic slightly shifts, but the job doesn't really shift all that much. We didn't really do a range clearance out there, but we had access to a range. We blew stuff up all the time. We still maintained our equipment packages, and for the most part, the job stays the same pretty much wherever you go. It's just a different operations tempo. Or, I mean, if you go to a combat zone, then it's super different.
Well, yeah. Is the mission basically the same on like your deployment? I know it was non-combat, but is it still kind of the same concerns? Range clearance, IEDs, dealing with unexploded ordnance.
Yeah. So, like for my deployment, the big concern was like non-combat deployments. You're typically there to support an airfield. So if you're there to support an airfield, you're kind of on standby all the time. You're just there in case something goes super sideways and the airfield gets bombed by some other country and you have to go clear the airfield, and they repair it and start sending jets off. But I'd say for the most part, it's the same threat wise. You're still looking for the same stuff. Where I was, we were still in the Middle East, so it was like the idea of IEDs being around was still, and not necessarily a threat, but something to keep in the back of your mind. People were still like on the lookout for IEDs, even though we were in an allied country. But you never know what could happen.
What does the downtime look like if you're potentially on call all the time?
So typically, the way standby schedules work is you'll have like a team of two, and it'll rotate weekly. So even on that deployment, like you were kind of allowed to do. It was almost like working stateside, except you, instead of working Monday through Friday, we worked Monday through Saturday. So we only had one day off, or one down day, and we just kind of worked around that. Uh, but because we were deployed and it is, leadership dependent, we were allowed to kind of like goof off more at work, and because we were all living where we worked too. So, during lunch we were all playing Xbox. But
Now, when you get that call, how many people are swarming that thing? Is it a very individual type of attention, or is it like a group of people working on the problem?
so if it's an actual just regular standby call, it really depends. Sometimes if you if you have a new guy, you'll typically bring him with you. Even though it's just the team of two that's on standby, you'll typically bring the new guy with you just to have him get some experience. And then sometimes there's people that just want to be on. They just want to be on as many calls as they can be on, so they'll just hop on. But like if it's at 3 a.m, typically nobody wants to
Yeah,
wake
yeah.
up, but the standby team has to wake up and go.
What about
So
outside of standby? If it were, say, a UXO or something, call for that coming in just normal working hours. Is the whole team going, or how's that look?
it's still just the same 2-man team. So standby is
Okay.
typically the only people that will respond unless someone else wants to go. Standby usually has to respond unless there's something else and someone can cover down for them. Uh, but for the most part, it's just that team of two that goes for any UXO that gets found, or any aircraft call that we get.
You kind of have like resident experts, guys that have been around for a while, and they're the go-to.
Definitely. Especially at my shop, there's a lot of people that are older souls. they're definitely older people. They're hanging around, and they've been in for 15 plus years. And they're typically the ones like if you really can't figure something out, you give them a call. Or, I mean, if you need help with something, they're usually there. And sometimes they're there just to share their stupid stories that make us all jealous.
Is it common to stay in EOD that whole time, or do people bounce around a lot?
So I'd say it was super common to stay EOD the whole time. I mean, it kind of once you're in EOD, it's really hard to leave because it's a critically manned career field. So we were such a small career field; it's really, really hard to leave. But I'd say like some of them were in a different career field before, and then they cross trained into EOD. Uh, but it it's getting less and less common that people even stay in EOD or in the military. Um, I'd say recently there's been some issues with recruiters selling kind of what EOD was doing 10 years ago, or Air Force EOD at least, selling new kids on like what EOD was doing 10 years ago. And they come in and find out that that's not exactly what's going on. Like we're not kicking in doors. We're not really even dealing with overseas IEDs. We're just there to support an airfield now.
Mm. Well, I know at one point they had on the kickoff of the war, like the Marines had engineers, the Corps of Engineers doing IEDs and stuff like that. How was
Yeah.
that changed? Is that the
So,
kind of stuff that was the thing where it was they were selling on some of the stuff that was happening before?
um, so I've seen quite a few Marine engineers, like or combat engineers, coming through and becoming EOD techs. Like I went through school with like I think it was like four Marines that were combat engineers that were like, "This is stupid," and I wanted to go be EOD. And I've run into a lot of Army combat engineers that try to say they're EOD, so they'll tell people that like what they do is the hurt locker, and it's like no.
Oh,
But like we run into a lot of issues with especially I'd say Army combat engineers where they think they're EOD techs, but really like they just know how to prime into C4. And as far as explosives go, like they'll they'll just blow up an IED, which like I could train you to do that tomorrow. It's that's not really a skill.
yeah, I would say it's a little more difficult to dismantle something. Like even the UXO you're talking about, it might be simple in terms of identifying, but it's a little more systematic in the removal, I'd imagine.
Oh yeah, it can be. It depends on how it's like. Sometimes like they'll just be found and they're just laying on the ground, and that's easy. But other times like they'll be buried, and you have to figure out a way to dig them out without it like if it's got something that's really sensitive in it, it's like a graze sensitive fuse, and you have to be really careful. But it's like buried 6 feet in the ground. Like figuring out how to get stuff like that out is part of the job, and it's
Versus just blowing it up.
yeah versus just like sometimes that is the answer. Like they're like sometimes it's just like you'll see something and you're like, can this area withstand a high order detonation? Like, do we have permission to just blow this up? And typically
And
the answer
that's
is
where the
no.
politics comes in, I would
Yeah,
imagine, too.
typically, like especially if it's stateside, like the EPA is going to be like, no, you can't do that. That's that's bad. And or like environmental will say that's bad. Like there's a lot of endangered tortoises, so it's bad. We can't just blow things up. And typically when we do, we have to get it cited by the environmentalists to make sure there's no tortoise homes in the area.
All right. Well, watch out for those tortoises.
Yeah.
So you said that the field is critically manned. Is that what you said it was?
Yeah.
Is that something that helped you decide on this career field, or did you kind of fall into it?
I fell into it. When I came in, so the first contract I signed, I was going to be an A-10 mechanic. I thought maybe I was going to work on jets, and then I was going to get out and I was going to go work for like Boeing or something and make just, buku bucks. I thought that was the plan. And I quickly realized that like, that wasn't what I wanted to do. I wanted something more. And so I was like, well, maybe I'll go do something cooler. I'll be a canine handler. My recruiter, so I told my recruiter, I was like, hey, I don't want this contract anymore. Signed a different contract. And ended up with canine contract, or what I thought was a canine contract. I found out it was a security forces contract, which is like being a military police for the Air Force, which fuck that. So I was like, I don't want to. I found out that I had to do that for 2 years before I could be a canine handler, and I was like, this is stupid. Why would you let me sign this? Like, you didn't tell me that. And eventually, it became this big back and forth. It was like, there's got to be something I could do. Like, I don't want to leave in 2 weeks and be a cop. So it became like I had to do something in what the Air Force, or not even the Air Force, it's what recruiting considered special operations. So I went and took at the time what the pass test, or passed, because the T is test. So I went out, took the passed, and it's like the physical airman. I forget what it stands for. It's not even a thing for EOD anymore, but it was a physical assessment test basically. Um, and I was going to try and do what's called TAC-P. Uh, Basically, I was going to. They integrate with the Army. They call in close air support and airstrikes. So I was going to try and do that, but I was told my eyesight wasn't good enough. And I begged and pleaded with my recruiter, and he was like, "Well, we have this thing called EOD," and I was like, "What's that?" And he's like, "Well, have you ever seen the Hurt Locker?" And I was like, "Sure, I'll do that." So, and then when I got to the prelim, like I sort of fell in love with it. Like I realized quickly, that my recruiter had kind of lied to me in a sense. Like he didn't sell me the full truth. Like Hurt Locker's super Hollywood, like it's super dramatic. Um, but yeah, I just fell in love with how awesome it was. Like originally the plan was like, I'll just do EOD for 2 years and I'll cross train and be a PJ or something. But I just ended up sticking with it, and then I don't know. I really love it now.
Did you have any other physical limitations that hurt you, or was it just the eyesight?
It was just the eyesight. Everything else was fine. Uh, there was some concern about my lung, but other than that, no.
Would that hold you back from doing anything now, or you cleared on that?
So I can't. There was a point in time where I was looking into possibly switching branches, doing some Navy EOD stuff, because I thought it would be cooler to do. Navy EOD kind of has, they're actually considered special operations. Or at least as far as I know, that's what I was informed. I don't know for sure if the Navy still considers them spec ops, but um, they do jump school and dive school, and I thought that'd be just awesome. But I wasn't able to do it because the issue that I have in my lung, I can't dive, so I can't do
What
any of
is
that cool
the
guy stuff.
what is the official issue with your lung?
So when I was 16, I had the spontaneous pneumothorax, and my lung collapsed. After they did a surgery and fixed it, basically they deemed it fully recovered, and the surgeon said that I was totally good. Like I could scuba dive, I could do whatever I wanted, but the Air Force deems it as too high risk. So I'm not, or the Air Force and the Navy deems it as too high risk. So I can't do anything like dive.
Got it.
I could do jump, but I just can't. I can't do dive. I can't. So they're worried about it causing too much pressure.
Now, for something like this, you mentioned taking that experience to the civilian world after. Is that still the plan? Are you just going to do your 20? What do you think your future looks like in this field?
Uh, it's still up in the air. I've got another 5 years. I just reenlisted not that long ago, so I've still got some time to figure out. At the end of this contract, I've been in for 9, and I'll I'll probably stay for 20. I think originally the plan was to stay for like 12 or so, and maybe move over into the FBI. But right now, I'm thinking probably just staying for 20, enjoying my time, blowing shit up, and then I'll probably move maybe into the cyber world. That's probably what I'm gonna work my college degree towards and kind of work into.
Are you planning on doing the college degree while you're still in, get that started, or would you do it after you get out?
I'm definitely going to do it while I'm still in. There's a lot of good programs through the Air Force that help a lot with getting your college degree for cheap, like tuition assistance and shit like that.
Since it's later on, would you try and make the jump to officer or no?
Nah. So the problem is like if I go through OTS, I'm no longer an EOD tech. Like I am, but I'm not. You can't. So for like EOD officers, they don't do any EOD work, and they are technically civil engineering officers, and that's not what I want. I don't want to be a civil engineer officer and then not be an EOD tech. I think if I'm going to be in the military, I have to be an EOD tech. Otherwise, I don't want to be in.
So in your case, you're happy you didn't finish school first. You're happy that you went in, kind of earned your stripes, so to speak, and do schooling later.
Oh yeah, definitely. I'm super happy that I just sounds bad, but I'm super happy that I just dropped out and and went to the military. It was probably the best decision I've made in my life.
So, but you'll still go back, and then what do you think you'll do in the civilian world in terms of cyber? Is there any specific hopes, or you just kind of see where it goes?
I'm just trying to see where it goes. I have no like my knowledge is very very limited in that realm. It's just kind of what I was thinking of moving towards. So I'm just kind of seeing where the world takes me. But that's kind of what I'm leaning toward. So I don't really have anything specific within cyber that I want to do.
Would you say, well, I guess the better way to phrase it was, who would you say that this career field is for?
Anyone who, I'd say, anyone who can get obsessive over a problem. Problem solving is a big thing. So if you really, really, really love problem solving and figuring things out, I'd say this career field's definitely for you. But you also have to be able to, you have to be physically fit. Like that has to be a thing. Especially the Air Force EOD standard is like it's a tier 2 fitness test now. So it's significantly harder than what it used to be. But I'd say anyone who loves problem solving, is physically fit, and also just, I mean, loves having fun, but you also kind of have to have a type A personality and you have to have thick skin.
No, when you say the tier two, what kind of stuff is on that? Like, is that one of the ones that incorporates the deadlift now as part of the test?
Yeah. Yeah. There's like a medicine ball throw. There's a trap bar deadlift. It measures your grip strength, grip endurance. There's a 1.5 mile run. There's a 1,000 meter row. There's all sorts of stuff in it. And it depending on how you're feeling that day, it could be kind of grueling. And how much
So
effort you put in.
it's actually worth practicing now when the old standards seem to be kind of like most people that were considered in shape could probably do it.
Yeah, I'd say it's worth practicing, especially some of the motions are definitely worth practicing.
What happens if, like you see a lot of other specialized type things where people wash out? Is that something that happens in EOD training at all? Like, hey, maybe this MOS isn't for me. What's the
Yeah.
fallback at that point?
So for most of the military, if you have signed a contract, that is going to be your job. EOD is one of the career fields where you can very easily fail out, especially for Air Force in the preliminary course. You do that in Texas, and it's about a month long. I was there for 2 months. I rolled back. So you can very easily and very quickly fail out. And I think when I went through, I think at prelim, it was like a 70% washout rate. But once you got through prelim, it was only like a 10% washout rate at Florida for the Air Force guys. It was a little higher for some of the other branches, but the Air Force guys were doing pretty good.
Um, what do you think predisposed you to picking up this field pretty well? I know that you kind of fell into it, but obviously you fell in love with it. Is it the problem solving portion, or was it something else too?
I'd say it's the problem solving portion, and it sounds kind of odd. I growing up, I watched uh, just a shitload of MythBusters. So just like seeing just Adam and Jamie, the way they approach problems was just so fascinating, and like the Jamie's line, the when in doubt C4, that like that has kind of become my mantra in EOD, and it's I think that kind of geared me toward it. I think just growing up, seeing that level of problem solving and scientific approach to different things um, made me want to kind of do the same thing.
Well, that's. I mean, if you're comparing it to MythBusters, that seems pretty dope for a job. What
Yeah,
would you say your least favorite part of the job is then?
the day to day stuff.
What
Day
does
to
that look
day,
like?
it's especially for the Air Force, it's a lot of sitting behind a desk. A lot of it is maintaining your EOD shop and maintaining the structure, maintaining your equipment. So a lot of the day to day stuff is shooting emails, returning equipment, receiving equipment, uh, making purchase plans, refreshing equipment. It gets boring and monotonous. Day to day, it is hard sometimes, but you kind of have to focus on like the fun times that you get to have if you just kind of make it through the day to day shit.
And how often is that broken up? Would you say when you're stateside versus on deployment as well?
So deployed, the day to day stuff was broken up pretty well. We went to the range and did a pretty big shot every other week. So like every other week, we were blowing up probably at least 500 pounds of explosives. Um, and then we, for the most part, we were training a lot deployed too. Stateside, I'd say there's so much going on in the shop. It's not supposed to happen, but I'd say the biggest issue that we have is training kind of falls to the wayside. Everyone says training shouldn't fall to the wayside, but it always, for whatever reason, is the first thing to go. So training will kind of fall to the wayside, and you end up sitting behind your desk more. So it's broken up. It's not broken up nearly as well stateside as it is deployed.
What does that training look like? Because I know like different MOSs, they might go out and get range time or things like that. Is it dealing with mocked munitions and things like that for you guys?
For us, it's dealing with like alerted or mocked munitions, and we'll, like for a UXO op, you'll have one person, the trainer, who will lay it out somewhere in a set scenario that they kind of want, and they'll make a phone call to you, and then you'll receive the phone call, go out, run it like it's a real op. Run it like it's a real op to an extent, like you're not actually calling the EPA, you're not dealing with any of that stuff. It's all in house, but that's typically what the training looks like. Same for IEDs, but you can run it anyway. So like we'll run overseas IEDs, like deployed IEDs, and we'll run it the same way. Like you'll get a call, you'll respond, or they'll make a mock patrol, and you'll roll around in a vehicle, or you'll be on foot if you're doing it dismounted.
How often should that training take place to stay sharp, you think?
I mean, so per our AFI, I forget. I think it's like 16 hours a week is what it's supposed to be, but that sometimes can be a little overwhelming and kind of unfeasible, given how much stuff that we have to do to maintain a shop, especially in a shop that's has less people, but is still kind of a big mission. So like if you've deployed a bunch of people and you are running on less people, sometimes it's a little unrealistic to get that much training. But personally, I think the schedule that we typically have is we train like Tuesdays and Thursdays are training days, and I think that's a like realistic expectation, and it's probably what you need.
Now, in your downtime, what are your hobbies looking like? What are you up to these days for fun?
I mean, for a while it was a lot of shooting, but I kind of, given the California gun laws, I want to shoot guns that I would actually work with in the military, and I can't. So a lot of what I've been doing is I just play a lot of video games, and I'm trying to pick guitar back up again.
So there's you got the alpha personality to fit in. You're fit. I'd say a lot of the other guys are too. Are the other guys kind of the same hobbies, or you guys all have different stuff that you're up to?
I'd say a lot of EOD guys are gun guys. Like a lot of us go shooting. I've only met a few that play guitar, but for the most part, like we all play video games together. Um, but I'd say a lot of the hobbies are pretty similar. A lot of dudes are more kind of outdoorsy, so they'll like to go camping and shit like that. But
Is it a lot of group activity with you guys, or is it more kind of one-on-one, like partner type situation? In terms of downtime, do you guys spend a lot of time together as a whole group, or just kind of pairing off?
it kind of depends on the shop. So, like where I'm at, I live with three other EOD guys. Um, but like in Korea, we were like as a shop, we were together all the time. So when I was in Korea, we spent time together. I mean, it was kind of the shop was kind of clicky, but not really. Um, for the most part, we were all pretty good about getting together, but there was always like at least like five or six of us. Whereas here, there's four of us that live in the same house, but we we go through phases where like we'll hang out a lot and then we won't. And I think some of that comes down to like you can only take so much of each other before arguments start to break out, and I mean sometimes fucking fights will break out. It's yeah.
All right, I was trying to get a feel for somebody thinking about it, what it would be like. Should they be a social person, an introvert?
You
I guess
should
they should be a pretty social person.
yeah, you should be pretty social. I mean it. I mean when I was growing up, I was super introverted. I was a weird kid. Like I'll be the first person to admit that I was awkward as fuck. But I definitely think this career field kind of brought me out of my shell. Like if you're not already out of your shell, it will bring you out of your shell, or you're just gonna fail, or you're gonna be one of the weird guys that nobody wants to hang out with, and you just don't want that. Like you're not gonna get the same level of respect, the same level of help and assistance and guidance throughout your career field if you're like that. I think me being brought out of my shell has been good for me, and I've made connections that'll last the rest of my life. So
Do you think that happened in your career field, or do you think that happened starting in boot camp?
I think it happened in my career field. I think even in boot camp, like I made some friends, but like for the most part, like I didn't really care about. I don't want to say I didn't care about those guys, but like at the same time, it was just kind of like I just needed to make it through those 8 weeks because I thought they were dumb. I think Air Force boot camp is kind of a joke. So like to me, it was just 8 weeks where I couldn't speak to any family other than through letters, and it kind of sucked. But to me, like boot camp was like I just have to make it through this so I can get to what's actually important.
So Air Force boot camp's 8 weeks, and then you go to your MOS school.
Yes. Yeah.
How long was the schooling for your MOS?
For EOD, you spend, like I said, it's a month in Texas for preliminary course, and if you make it through there, you end up going to Florida, and you go to Eglin Air Force Base, which is up in the Panhandle, and it's an awesome spot, especially if you're there for spring break. You go over to Destin, but it's there, and once you get there, it's about 9 months. So you're there for a while. Like for me, it took me, I think, 1 month shy of a year, or no, it took me over a year. It took me over a year to actually get through EOD school. So
Right after you get out of boot camp, do you ship immediately, or do you have to wait for like the next schooling date?
oh no, it's immediate. For you leave boot camp immediately, so they'll bus you over to Shepherd Air Force Base. But once you get there, you could be stuck there. So like when I got to Shepherd, um, they were doing one more class, and you like compete for it. You do a physical assessment, compete for it. I made it in, but I failed a test twice in a row. So they rolled me, and there wasn't another class for like 3 weeks. So we were just sitting there, and we had to report every day at 4 a.m, and then we just did like yard work for them for 3 weeks.
So don't fail any tests.
No, I wouldn't recommend it. I'd say like prelim, I failed one test, and it was that same test, or No, I failed 3 tests. I failed that same test twice, and then the last test that you take, like pretty much everyone fails it.
Mm.
Um, I don't know if they still do that, but before it was like everyone failed their first go around just because to kind of scare you, make sure you know that even though you're at the last like 2 days of prelim, you're not safe. Um, but then when I got to actual EOD school, I only failed 2 tests there, and I didn't roll back there. But I'd say failing isn't a bad thing. One of my best friends failed like, oh god, it felt like every other test he was failing. But like that dude, I mean, he's a great EOD tech, and I'd trust that guy with my life. Like I'd say school is just a test of your ability to learn. It's not necessarily your test is a. It's not necessarily like to show whether you're a good EOD tech, because once you get to your shop, they just reteach you everything anyway.
Oh, okay. So there's a lot of on-the-job training as well.
Oh yeah, there's like so you go through that year of school, and then you get to your shop, and then you spend about another year doing on the job.
Is there like continuing education that you have to stay up on? Like, I don't know how much munitions would change, but
So you're constantly doing training, and then there's like upgrade training. So in the Air Force, there's skill levels. So there's like 1, which is you haven't even graduated. Then there's the 3 level when you graduate your school. But at 3 level, you have to be supervised for everything you do. And then when you become a 5 level, uh, after that year of on-the-job training, or depending on how fast you can do it, usually it's anywhere between 9 months and a year. Um, you'll finish that. You'll become a 5 level. You don't have to be supervised. You're like a full-blown EOD team member. And then when you promote to the rank of staff sergeant, you become a 7 level, or you have to upgrade to 7 level. So you have to become a 7 level. And once you're a 7 level, you're a full-fledged team leader. And then a 9 level is like you're a manager type position. That's for like the senior enlisted, E7 and above.
oh, okay. Are they still getting to do EOD things though before making that officer jump?
Well, I mean, it's not even officer. It's like it's all enlisted.
Well,
Like,
yeah, but I mean, you said once you get into the officer ranks, you're not doing EOD work anymore. So for the senior enlisted guys, are they still at least getting to do EOD stuff, or is it still a lot of paperwork? It's kind of transitioning to that more officer role.
it's kind of transitioning to like, so like typically to, I'd say most of the senior enlisted I've seen don't ever go officer. It's usually like and this is just from what I've seen. I can't speak on behalf of like what everyone else has seen, but it's, I'd say once you get to like E7, yeah, you're running a shop. You're doing more the like managing your guys, making sure everyone has what they need. You're not doing as much EOD work, and then you're basically your job at that is you're liaising for the lower enlisted to the officer of the shop, and the officer's liaising from the EOD shop to the big Air Force.
Got it. Got it. So if you could have any job, civilian or in the military, you just wave that magic wand, would it still be this, or what would it be?
Oh yeah, I would still be this. I can't imagine doing anything else, and which is kind of scary because it's easy to lose the job. Like you can make some pretty, if you make a good enough mistake, you can be booted out pretty quick. So it's kind of scary to think that like this is the only thing that I want to do right now because I don't know what I would do without it. But yeah, if I could wave a magic wand, if I could go back to that time and wave a magic wand and have any job, I'd go right back to this.
Now, what about if you get booted out, where do you go?
It really depends. It, um, so like in school, the biggest fear was like if you got kicked out or you failed out, the biggest fear was you were going to go be either a cop or a plumber, because that's what we kept seeing is like, be like, dude, what happened? Like, what contract did they give you? And they're like, I'm going to be a fucking plumber. And you're like, they're like, I'm going to be a fucking cop. And you're like, I'll see you at the gate, buddy.
uh, so you earlier we mentioned the elders, that a lot of experience, cool stories, that kind of stuff. What kind of advice have they given you?
Um, I think some of the advice is good, and some of it's like kind of personal advice. I'd say uh, one of the mentors that I had, like his big thing was like, don't let this job like take over everything. Like if this job wants you to do something, his big thing was like government work, government time. Like he understood that I really loved this job, and like this it meant everything to me. But he also understood that like if I kept going on the path that I was going, where I was just like staying after work, or I was constantly freaking out about work when I wasn't at work, um, like I was going to burn out. And like I've seen it happen. I've seen people burn out, and that's when you start making mistakes or you do stupid stuff. But his big thing was like government work, government time. If the government wants you to do something, do it on their time. Like unless it's something that you're going to go to jail for, or something that you could be fined for, or something extremely pressing, like actually pressing, wait until you can go into work. So I mean, that's probably some of the best advice I've gotten.
Yeah, well, that definitely translates to the civilian world as well.
Yeah.
Well, it is Memorial Day today. Do you have anything specific for Memorial Day you'd like to share or anything like that?
Um, nothing, nothing specific. I'd say if anyone's looking to, I, it feels weird, but if anyone's looking to donate money, or anything like that, I'd highly recommend if you're looking at a charity. The EOD Warrior Foundation is a really solid charity. They're based out of Florida. They've done some amazing things for the families of the fallen.
And do you have anything specific, personal, or anything like that you'd like to add? Anything you're working on that you're excited about?
No, just studying, working on trying to get promoted.
So what's next for the promotion? Is it change in responsibilities, or is it just more money?
It's more money, and some responsibilities would change. Just when I'd be a team leader and I'd be a supervisor, and I'd be taking on a bigger role for the Air Force, which is what I want to do. But we'll see.
All right. Well, good luck with that. I'd like to see maybe in a couple of years how things have changed. If you're still all in, or if there's anything different that you'd want to do at that point or work towards.
Hopefully, in a couple of years, I'll be a team leader, and I'll be able to offer a slightly different perspective.
That'd be perfect. Well, all right. Well, thanks for waking up early today. I know normally it's going hard. You're going to bed at 4 in the morning and then waking up at 2 in the afternoon or whatever.
Hell yeah. That's the life.
All right, man. Well, I appreciate it, and I'll talk to you later on.
All right. Have a good one.
Thanks. You too.
Bye.